Have you ever wondered why people suddenly start acting distant? Why someone who used to talk to you every day suddenly goes quiet? Why a person who once cared, listened, showed up, starts acting like you don't even exist? No fight, no goodbye, just silence. But what if I told you, people don't always leave because of something you did. They leave because of something they feel and can't admit. It's like a coat in winter, worn tightly when the air is cold and comfort is needed. But the moment the weather changes, the same coat feels heavy, unnecessary, and is quietly taken off. Or it's like shade on a summer day, welcomed when the heat is harsh, but ignored the moment clouds appear. That's how people treat consistency. They stay close when it serves them, but grow distant when they feel they no longer need your warmth. Because while they're pulling away in silence, you have a choice. Chase their distance or stand still in your truth. And when you stop reaching out, that's when the confusion sets in. The moment you stop asking why they left, they start realizing what they walked away from. So, how do you handle it when someone suddenly acts distant? Without warning, without reason. Stay with me until the end, because once you understand what their silence is really saying, you'll never chase it again. Let's begin. Number 1. They're struggling internally. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood reasons why people suddenly become distant: someone who is struggling internally. This is the person who stops texting back as often, becomes quieter in conversations, or slowly pulls away without any explanation. And naturally, we take it personally. We start replaying everything we said or did, wondering if we upset them or if we've been replaced. But here's the truth. Most of the time, their distance isn't about you. It's about what they're dealing with behind the scenes. Here's the reality. Often, people pull away when they're overwhelmed, lost, or mentally exhausted. They might be dealing with personal problems, internal battles, or emotional burnout that they don't know how to express. And instead of reaching out for help, they retreat, they isolate, they shut down. Not because they don't care, but because they don't have the capacity to show up the way they used to. And the more pressure they feel to explain, the more they withdraw. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." In other words, while it's easy to take someone's silence as rejection, the wiser path is to respond with compassion, not ego. The Stoics teach us that most of what people do is a reflection of their own inner state, not a judgment of ours. And when someone creates distance, it's often because they're trying to protect their peace, even if they don't know how to say that out loud. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Emily, was incredibly close with her friend Jenna. They talked every day, shared everything, and were practically inseparable. But then Jenna slowly started pulling away. No big fight, no drama, just silence. Emily was hurt and confused. She wondered if she had done something wrong. But months later, Jenna finally opened up. She had been going through a deep personal crisis, anxiety, family stress, and emotional exhaustion, and she didn't know how to talk about it. She wasn't avoiding Emily out of malice. She was drowning quietly and didn't want to bring anyone down with her. So, how do you respond when someone suddenly acts distant? First, don't assume the worst. Sometimes it's not about you at all. Second, give them space without resentment. Everyone handles struggle differently. And finally, be there, quietly, gently, patiently. Sometimes the best support isn't asking questions, it's letting someone know you're there when they're ready. At the end of the day, people who are struggling don't always know how to ask for help. So instead of reacting with anger or insecurity, respond with wisdom. Their distance isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just a quiet cry for space to heal. Number 2, they no longer feel understood. Let's talk about one of the most emotionally subtle yet deeply painful reasons people start acting distant. Someone who no longer feels understood. At first, everything seems fine. The conversations still happen. The routine remains unchanged. But slowly, their responses start to shrink. Their presence begins to fade. They don't argue. They don't explain. They just slowly pull away. And we're left wondering what happened. But here's the truth. When someone feels unheard or misunderstood for too long, they don't always speak up. They retreat. Here's the reality. Instead of opening up and risking more frustration, they choose silence. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe to be fully themselves. Maybe they tried to share something and were dismissed. Maybe they opened up once and were met with judgment, advice, or indifference. Whatever the reason, they decided that speaking won't help, so they stop trying. And the more they feel unseen, the more distance they create. It's not anger, it's quiet self-protection. This is where Stoic wisdom offers powerful clarity. Epictetus said, "Nature gave us one tongue and 2 ears, so we could listen twice as much as we speak." The Stoics believed that wisdom starts with listening, deep, intentional listening. When someone feels truly heard, they feel safe. They feel like they matter. But when they feel constantly overlooked, misread, or corrected, they eventually decide it's easier to keep things to themselves, and so they drift, not to hurt you, but to protect themselves. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Tyler, was in a long-term relationship where everything looked fine on the surface. But slowly, his partner Rachel started becoming distant. Fewer texts, less affection, shorter conversations. At first, Tyler thought she was losing interest. But when they finally sat down and talked, Rachel admitted something simple but heartbreaking. "I don't feel like you hear me. You always try to fix things, but you never just listen." That was the root of her silence. She didn't want to pull away, but she didn't feel emotionally understood anymore, so she stopped opening up. So, how do you respond when someone feels misunderstood? First, slow down. Don't assume they're pulling away because they're cold or indifferent. Second, listen, not to reply, but to understand. Let them speak without rushing in to fix, correct, or advise. And finally, create space for openness. Let them know they're safe to express without being judged. At the end of the day, distance doesn't always come from disinterest. It often comes from emotional exhaustion. When someone feels like they're not being heard, silence becomes their shield. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer isn't advice, it's your presence and your willingness to truly hear them. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3, they're testing your presence. Let's talk about one of the more manipulative reasons people suddenly start acting distant. Someone who goes quiet not because they're hurt, but because they're testing your presence. They want to see if you'll notice, if you'll worry, if you'll chase. It's not a cry for help, it's a calculated pause. They're pulling back to see how far you'll lean in. And the truth is, this isn't about connection, it's about control. Here's the reality. Some people use silence as a strategy. They disappear to create tension. They withhold affection to gain attention. And when you finally reach out in confusion or desperation, they feel powerful. Your response confirms that they matter, that they still have emotional pull. But this kind of dynamic doesn't build closeness, it builds resentment, because instead of communicating their needs with honesty, they play a quiet game, waiting to see how much effort you'll give when they give you nothing. This is where Stoic-aligned thought brings real clarity. Naval Ravikant once said, "Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want." When someone desires control, recognition, or attention from you, but refuses to ask for it directly, they create this contract within themselves. I'll withhold, I'll disappear, and I'll stay distant until you chase me. But what happens when you stop chasing? The illusion breaks. The power they were trying to build begins to fade. That's when the truth comes out, whether they actually care or just cared about being wanted. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Melissa, was dating a guy named James. Things were going well until out of nowhere he started pulling back. No fights, no explanation, just distance. At first, Melissa thought he was going through something, so she reached out, tried to be supportive. But the more effort she gave, the more aloof he became. It wasn't until she stopped texting first and gave him space that he came back around, suddenly warm again, suddenly present. That's when she realized he didn't miss her. He missed being chased. So how do you handle someone who's testing your presence? First, recognize the pattern. If someone's silence always comes with the expectation that you'll come running, take a step back. Second, don't let their emotional control define your self-worth. You don't have to prove your loyalty by responding to every silence. And finally, let people earn your attention with honesty, not with manipulation. At the end of the day, silence can be a form of communication, but when it's used to control, it's not love, it's strategy. And if someone's connection with you depends on how hard you chase, then maybe what they're seeking isn't connection at all. It's control disguised as distance. Number 4, they don't know how to say goodbye. Let's talk about a form of distance that hurts in the quietest way. Someone who doesn't know how to say goodbye. They don't give you a reason. They don't offer closure. They just slowly disappear. The conversations dry up. The warmth fades. And before you even realize what's happening, they're gone. Not with an argument, not with honesty, but with silence. Here's the truth. Some people simply don't have the courage to end things directly. Confrontation feels too heavy. Truth feels too sharp. So instead of facing the discomfort of honesty, they choose the path of fading out. Distance becomes their quiet exit, and it leaves you stuck in limbo, trying to read between the lines of silence, questioning your worth, wondering what you did wrong, when in reality, you never even had the chance to respond. This is where Stoic wisdom offers perspective. Marcus Aurelius said, "The obstacle is the way, even in parting." Sometimes the silence itself is the final message. The unanswered calls, the ignored texts, the shift in energy. Those are all signs. Not of your failure, but of their inability to finish what they started. And the obstacle here, the lack of closure, is also the path forward. It forces you to create your own ending, to find peace without permission. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Vanessa, had been talking to someone for nearly a year. Everything seemed real, deep conversations, future plans, shared memories. But slowly, he started pulling back. He was busy, then he was quiet, then he was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Vanessa was devastated. She replayed every moment trying to find a clue, but eventually she stopped asking why he left. and started asking why she was holding space for someone who no longer showed up. That shift was everything. So, how do you handle someone who disappears instead of saying goodbye? First, accept what's unsaid. Their silence may be the only closure you ever get. Second, don't internalize their cowardice. Their inability to communicate isn't a reflection of your worth. And finally, let the distance speak. It may not give you the answers you wanted, but it reveals the truth you needed. At the end of the day, not everyone knows how to say goodbye. Some fade to avoid the weight of honesty. But even in their silence, you gain something powerful. The chance to walk forward, not waiting, not wondering, but free. Because when someone leaves without a word, they've already told you everything. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. They're prioritizing themselves. Let's talk about a reason that's easy to misinterpret. Someone who starts acting distant because they're choosing to prioritize themselves. It's natural to take distance personally. You wonder if they're upset with you, if something's changed, or if you've done something wrong. But sometimes the truth is much simpler. They're not avoiding you, they're choosing themselves. And that choice doesn't always come from conflict. Sometimes it comes from a deep need to pause, reflect, and realign. Here's the reality. Stepping away can be an act of self-care. When someone is feeling burned out, emotionally drained, or mentally cluttered, the most powerful thing they can do is disconnect from the noise, the expectations, and even the people they love. That distance isn't rejection, it's renewal. They might be taking time to focus on their goals, to rebuild their energy, or to reconnect with who they are outside of constant interaction. And while it may feel like they're pulling away from you, what they're really doing is pulling inward. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." That means the highest form of strength is not dominance over others, it's discipline over your own choices. When someone chooses stillness over socializing, when they choose solitude over constant engagement, they're exercising that inner power. It's not about shutting people out, it's about tuning into what they truly need. And that kind of self-prioritization isn't selfish, it's survival. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Natalie, had always been the go-to person for everyone. Friends, family, co-workers. She was constantly giving, constantly available. But over time, it took a toll. She felt stretched thin, disconnected from her own goals, and mentally exhausted. So she did something bold. She went quiet. She stopped replying right away, said no to gatherings, and took time to herself. Some people got offended, but others, those who understood, respected her space. And after a few weeks of real rest and reflection, Natalie came back with more clarity, peace, and strength than she'd had in years. Her distance wasn't disconnection, it was healing. So how do you respond when someone starts prioritizing themselves? First, let go of the urge to take it personally. Their need for space isn't always about you. Second, support their boundaries without guilt-tripping or demanding explanations. And third, take a moment to reflect. Maybe you need space too. Sometimes someone else's pause reminds us to slow down ourselves. At the end of the day, distance can be a form of strength. When someone steps back to care for themselves, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. And if they return, they'll come back more whole, more centered, and more present. Respect the pause. It often leads to something better. Number 6. They're hiding guilt or shame. Let's talk about a reason that's often overlooked but incredibly real. Someone who grows distant because they're carrying guilt or shame. They know they've hurt you. They know they crossed a line, said something they shouldn't have, or failed to show up when it mattered. But instead of owning it, they disappear. Instead of making things right, they stay silent. It's not because they don't care. It's because they're avoiding accountability. Here's the truth. When someone knows they've done wrong, they don't always come forward and admit it. Sometimes they vanish. They avoid conversations, dodge eye contact, ignore messages, not because they want to forget you, but because they can't face themselves. Their silence is a shield, a way to avoid hearing what they already know. They messed up. And the longer they stay away, the harder it becomes to return. Shame grows in the silence. This is where Stoic wisdom hits deep. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A guilty conscience needs no accuser." In other words, when someone knows they're in the wrong, they don't need you to call them out. They're already carrying the weight of their own choices. That guilt becomes the voice in their head, the wall between you and them. It's not that they're over it. It's that they're drowning in it and pretending to be fine. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Chris, had a close friend, David. They were like brothers. But one day, David betrayed Chris's trust in a way that cut deep. Chris never confronted him with anger, just quiet distance. But interestingly, David didn't fight for the friendship. He didn't apologize. He just faded. Weeks turned into months, and Chris finally realized David wasn't avoiding him because he didn't care. He was avoiding him because he couldn't bear the discomfort of owning what he had done. Guilt had taken the wheel. So how do you handle someone who's hiding behind distance because of guilt or shame? First, recognize it for what it is. Don't mistake their silence for a lack of remorse. Often it's the opposite. Second, protect your peace. You're not responsible for dragging someone back into integrity. If they're ready to take accountability, they will. And finally, don't wait for closure. Sometimes the distance is the apology, and the silence says everything they're too afraid to admit. At the end of the day, people don't always disappear because they don't care. Sometimes they disappear because they do, and they don't know how to face the damage they've done. Let them sit with it. If the bond was real, they'll either return with growth or remain a lesson in what happens when guilt outweighs courage. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 7. They've shifted their loyalty. Let's talk about one of the hardest truths to accept. Someone who's grown distant because their loyalty has shifted. It doesn't always happen with a dramatic exit. Often, it starts quietly. The texts slow down, the conversations lose depth, their interest seems to drift. And while they may still be physically present, emotionally, they've checked out. You feel it, even if they won't say it. Because deep down, they've already redirected their attention, their energy, their loyalty, just not their honesty. Here's the reality. When someone shifts their loyalty elsewhere, it's rarely something they'll admit up front. Why? Because it's easier to let distance build than it is to confront the discomfort of telling the truth. They don't want to be the villain. They don't want to say, "I've outgrown this connection," or "I'm more invested somewhere else." So instead, they stay quiet. They let the space grow, hoping you'll eventually stop asking, stop trying, stop caring. This is where Stoic wisdom cuts through the confusion. A paraphrased insight from Epictetus says it clearly: loyalty that fades was never true. In other words, if someone's devotion can quietly drift away the moment something new or easier comes along, then that connection wasn't rooted in depth. It was based on convenience, comfort, or circumstance. True loyalty is tested when things get uncertain. If someone can walk away without a word, they were never really standing beside you to begin with. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Olivia, was in a long-term relationship with a guy named Jake. For years, he was consistent, warm, engaged. But over time, things shifted. He was less present, less interested. He'd check his phone constantly when they were together, and his responses became short, distracted. Olivia sensed it. When she finally confronted him, Jake admitted the truth. He had developed feelings for someone else. And while he hadn't acted on them yet, his loyalty had already moved. That was the moment Olivia understood. The distance wasn't random. It was redirected attention, cloaked in silence. So how do you respond when you feel someone's loyalty has shifted? First, stop chasing clarity from someone who's already emotionally gone. If you feel the shift, trust it. Second, don't beg someone to stay connected. It only delays the inevitable. And finally, remind yourself of this: true loyalty doesn't just disappear. It stands firm, even in silence. At the end of the day, when someone drifts without explanation, it often means their loyalty has already landed elsewhere. Don't waste your energy trying to pull them back. Let their distance reveal their truth, and give yourself permission to move forward with yours. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.